Musical Talk, the UK independent musical theatre podcast.
Hello, welcome to Musical Talk. My name is Nick Hudson. I am sitting virtually. Oh, I can't wait to see people again. I'm sitting here with Ryan. Hello, Ryan.
Bonjour, hello.
How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Ready to get back to work.
Ready to get back to work, ready to get back to the theatres, ready to get,
Yes.
I'm sure you're up north. Well, you're north to me, aren't you? You're up north in Staffordshire, aren't you?
Yes, very, very Midlands based, but definitely very north to anyone in London.
Are you missing London? Are you looking forward to coming back, if you ever will?
I do miss London. I miss the main thing I miss about London is, it's probably something we'll get onto a little bit, specifically talking about theatre, but the spontaneity of the way you can do things there. Like if you want to go out and do something in the evening in London, 9 times out of 10, you just hop on a tube and you can go do it. Whereas in the Midlands, if I did want to do something spontaneously, there's about a 30 to 40 minute drive to wherever I want to get to. And that's if the other people you want to do things with have a car to be able to travel, because public transport in the Midlands is just not a thing.
At least there'll be parking, though. That's the main thing.
That is true. And free parking at that.
Yes. That always amazed me when I'm in America or something. You can just drive up and park. I mean, not New York or Hollywood or something.
No.
You can just kind of drive up and park on the side of a road. It's just foreign, isn't it?
It's strange. Their service stations there are strange as well. They have well, I suppose they're not strange. They're very much the same as here, but they almost encourage people sleeping at the side of the road in their cars there.
I'm going to mute my Twitter, ladies and gentlemen, because I put a tweet out that's gone viral, which is annoying me. So I'm going to put this into Do Not Disturb.
Boo-hoo.
Yes, so you don't always get do every 4 seconds. Yeah, so I thought we'd just kind of have a spontaneous conversation. I kind of said to you, there's not much I can talk about at the moment because nothing's opening, but it is very exciting to see what things are planning to open. Whether it happens or not, that remains to be seen. But it's the most promising, I think, that we've seen the West End theatre certainly be in a long time, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of enhanced by the fact that people have not sat in a theatre for what seems like 10 years at this point.
Yeah.
So ignoring all the fact that so many exciting things are reopening, it's just going to be exciting to go and see the casts that got their run cut short previously. So, yeah.
Last week we talked about the last thing that we saw, and for me it was Back to the Future, and for my co-host John, it was West Side Story on Broadway. Ooh. I think I know the last thing you saw, Ryan, because it might have been with me, but was it 6?
No, so I saw one thing really randomly just as everything started to kick off in regards to, I mean, the pandemic sounds like a trigger word now, so I hate saying it, but I saw a Sunday matinee of Be More Chill at the Other Palace. And it was fun. It was a fun evening. I say evening, fun afternoon. I remember lying in my bed and being like, how quickly can I drive to Chiswick to park outside Nick's to then get on the tube and get to the Other Palace? And I just about did it. I walked through the doors maybe 5 minutes before the show started.
And again, going back to your spontaneity of London.
Absolutely.
So tell us about the show. What do you like about it? What did you not like about it?
Be More Chill. It's a very energetic show, and from a cast perspective,
how ironic.
Talking from a cast perspective and a performer perspective, it's a hot, regardless of what character you're playing in that, at any point you're then sort of air quotes the ensemble, I guess. For those who haven't seen it, that's sort of how they do that, and basically everyone's constantly on stage, and the energy they have to put into that is incredible. It's a show that that interests me in regards to, if auditions came about again at some point in the future, would I want to go to one of those? Yes, I would, because it's a very fun show. It's very contemporary, very niche, but I think it hits the demographic where if you really like Heathers and you really like Dear Evan Hansen, I think you would very easily fit into the demographic of Be More Chill. And I sound like I'm talking.
It's interesting. No, I don't like Dear Evan Hansen that much, but I loved Heathers. So why do you think those shows are so similar? Is it the kind of teenage kind of market?
it's kind of the teenage market, and it follows a certain storyline of like it's quite angsty, I guess. I sort of felt like it was quite angsty. The one thing I will say about Be More Chill is it's less rooted in reality. I say reality like Heather's is a thing that would happen in today's day and age. Of course it wouldn't.
Blowing a school up, why not?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a, yeah, but I feel like without sounding dark and twisted, Heather's is probably something that's maybe more likely to happen than that of a supercomputer being implanted in your brain, which is what Be More Chill is
that's
about.
That's what many people think the vaccine is about. So,
well, that's interesting. I wonder if that will cause the show to have some kind of resurgence, and or I'm from a marketing perspective, I'd be really intrigued to see how they go about that moving forward.
I mean, you touch on the plot. Tell us more about, because I don't know much about it at all. So.
Yeah. So the story is, it follows the sort of the vehicle, I guess. Jeremy, he's a typical nerd, I guess, not very popular. And to shorten this as much as possible without giving too much of the plot away, he basically, through talking to other people throughout the story, finds he can take a pill that will plant a supercomputer in his brain that then basically makes him cool.
Okay.
And it follows the route of like,
it sounds like it sounds like an 80s film called Revenge of the Nerds or something, doesn't it?
It feels, to me, it feels very like 80s sci-fi, like an 80s sci-fi angsty flick, I guess. But it's very fun, and the music in it it's a big sing for basically everyone, which I enjoy because I like high belting at the best of times. And it's just, I thought it was very fun.
Was it set in the 80s, or was it set now, or set in some weird kind of not quite the future, not quite the past? Which would be the present, surely.
Well, yes. I felt like there were definitely references to now, but also with the nature of the storyline felt, at the time, prior to all of these vaccine conversations, felt quite dated. So it did exist in this plane where it could have been anytime, anywhere, at any place, which I really like. It keeps it somewhat timeless.
I guess it's quite difficult if you're the lead in that show. You think, I got to play a nerd now, and it's, everything from Grease to so many other musicals has the kind of, I'm watching bits of the Big Bang Theory at the moment, and there's how do you portray a nerd on stage that is kind of, I don't want to say offensive because everything's offensive nowadays, but do you see what I'm asking, Ryan? Like, kind of, how do you, was it kind of, did he have glasses, and was he kind of, shy in his portrayal of the character, or what?
There was,
if you can remember.
Jeremy was played by, and I'm probably going to pronounce his surname wrong, Scott Folan. I think it's Folan. That would make the most sense. And one thing I really want to commend about the show, before I talk about that quickly, is just how big of a change he had in terms of character. Really, from an actor's perspective, you look at it and you're like, it's a very definitive change as to if you were to for whatever reason walk into the show mid show and having not seen him in his geeky air quotes form, you'd be like, oh, okay, so he's just playing this character. It was a very, very impressive sort of character change. But no, I wouldn't say it was stereotypical, but it definitely had nods to what you would expect. Like, Scott himself is quite tall and quite skinny, and I guess that's the attribute with a lot of sort of computer nerds that you would necessarily see in film and TV. But I don't know. I honestly think in regards to casting, literally anybody could play the role of Jeremy and it wouldn't really matter. I just think it's really hard to explain without seeing it, but there was very much a more of a timid approach when he wasn't, very awkward, very shy, then flip side, mirroring that.
It seems to be a very Other Palace show, and if you've been to the Other Palace, you'll know what I mean. It's kind of very, I think Heather's, obviously started by Legally Blonde. I think that kind of trend of whatever that show is, teenagey, angsty, cleverly written American musicals. I just wonder, apart from oh God, what was that thing that written by McFly or Busted or one of them, the kind of geek musical that went to the Garrick Theatre for a while, that is, the name is really escaping me and it's annoying me, but I want to ask, why do you think there's ever been a kind of British teen angst musical? I'm sure there's been loads of them in kind of Edinburgh and all that kind of stuff, but it seems to be a very American, and it always has to have rock in it, doesn't it? Because that's the kind of American idiom that probably started it all.
I think purely from I don't want to say Hollywood perspective, but I think traditionally the American air quotes geek or nerd is a lot easier. It's a lot more glamorous, if that makes sense. Whereas in like the angsty teen sort of world in the States is like it. I don't want to say glamorous. I'm not saying glamorous as in like it's all puppy dogs and rainbows, but I mean like it's slightly easier to market, because I definitely feel like being a teenager in England, from my experience, is
the in-betweeners.
Yeah, it's a bit grungier, I guess. I don't know.
And
I think
the show I was thinking of was called Loserville, by the way.
Loserville, yeah.
But yeah, I think Hollywood has glamorized the teenage, everything from, Grease, even though they're about 70 when they're playing the roles on film. But, Grease, dare I say, Saturday Night Fever, they were probably not teenagers, but, the kind of Clueless, 10 Things I Hate About You, Legally Blonde, everything. It is a kind of very blue skies, palm trees, glitzy high school, and it kind of adds to that fantasy world, doesn't it?
The closest I've ever seen to an accurate representation of what it is to be in a British high school on stage in musical form, and I'm sure loads more exist, I'm just not privy to them, is, everybody's talking about Jamie, and they do it very well. I recently just rewatched that because I hadn't seen it in a very long time. I was like, I want to watch this again. And there's such a contrast between, you look at something like everybody's talking about Jamie versus I keep going to Heathers just because I've said Heathers and it's now in my brain, but there is a large difference.
Yes.
It almost feels like the American teenage experience.
One has intelligent songs with good lyrics and everybody's talking about Jamie doesn't. But I see what you mean. One is, everybody's talking about Jamie, the kind of colour scheme in the show was grey for most of it until we got into the kind of colourful costume shop and things, and it was obviously set in Sheffield, so a very accurate representation of Sheffield on stage, grey, and it certainly does lend itself to the kind of
it's also
fantastical image that we have of America. I was fascinated by American high schools when I was a teenager. It was like, I want to go and see what it is. It really like this?
Yeah, and I also think it comes from a place of like translation. Like I'm sure a lot of writers, I'm not 100% sure, but I have a little bit of experience in it now based on the project that we're working on. But I'm sure that writers want their shows and their sort of art, the creations, to be able to be translated easily to other places. And I feel primarily just because it's stuff that we're accustomed to, I feel it's easier to translate an American high school experience to the UK than it would be to translate a British high school experience to the States, which is, granted, this theatre far wider than that of England and the States. But if we're talking about those two players there, I think that's probably another reason why we don't see a lot.
There was a tweet going around today and yesterday about, we're moving on from that, so thank you for talking about that, Ryan. I hope the show comes back at some point. The Wicked Witch of the East song from Wicked, how much we want that to be on the cast recording, because it's an amazing moment. And it kind of got me thinking about, it's so annoying now, majority of people get their show albums digitally, so there's no excuse now. We only have 74 minutes. We can't go beyond that. What albums annoy you when they just kind of skip songs, or they skip entire dance sections or overtures and think, what comes to your mind?
So Oh god, that's the one that comes to mind, and I'm not going to say it annoys me because it doesn't, because it works based on how they've done it. But after seeing the show, I'm like, oh, well, I really want that to be in it so I can listen to that. I'd love an updated recording of Six with the separation of, because the way they've done it on the Studio Cast album is great, and they've blended in the remix with oh my god, Par's song, and it's great and it works for, but like now I've seen the show, I'd really enjoy like the Berlin introduction, and then the why am I forgetting the names of all of the songs, the one that comes between Heart of Stone and Cleves, a House of Holbein. There's a House of Holbein playoff and stuff like that, and I'd love the Mega Six to be on that recording as well.
I mean, I agree, but I like the element of surprise because I knew the album first going into the show, thinking it was just going to be, it's just going to be these songs, and it so isn't, which is kind of, again, it's the kind of Nessa Rose example. We're kind of teasing you in a bit, saying you're going to get a lot more than you think. I doubt it was thought about that much. It's just kind of, these are the songs, and we don't want to kind of do tiny 30-second bits here and there.
It's interesting you mention the Wicked Witch of the East with Wicked, because I don't mean to be like throwing in other content here, but one of my favorite podcasts I've been listening to recently is Sentimental Men, and they've been talking to a lot of Elphabas and Glindas and other Wicked people about Wicked, and that came up, and they mentioned that, I can't remember what guest it was, but somebody spoke about it and the fact that the reason it probably wasn't included is because it gives too much of the plot away. And in a time when people are listening to recordings before they're seeing shows, or the only thing you can do is get your hand on a recording, especially if a show is so popular, pardon the pun,
and wonderful.
It's why Defying Gravity on the album is 5 minutes, as opposed to when you see it in person, it's a full 7 to 8 minute sequence.
I remember getting the Wicked album at Tower Records on Times Square. That's, how old-fashioned I am. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'd love the full version of Dancing Through Life, for example, to be on the album. Yeah. And you wonder why shows, Wicked's been around for a million years now, so everyone knows the story of Wicked. Why don't they kind of re-release the 45th anniversary of the album and kind of include that moment? I remember there's an album of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels with John Lithgow, and speaking of Wicked, Norbert Leo Butts and Sherry Renee Scott, which I saw on Broadway and loved it. And there's kind of a bit from John Lithgow in the album where he says, "Hello, this is John Lithgow here. The next few tracks contain a couple of twists and turns. So if you haven't seen the show, please," I think it says, "turn the CD off, call a babysitter and go and see the show and book the best seats in the house because I'm a closed source. If you have seen the show, carry on playing and then book a ticket to see the show again." Now, that lends itself to the irreverent style of the show, which had the best pre-show announcement I've ever heard in my life, which was, "Hello, this is John Lithgow. At this production of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, there will be no pre-show announcement. Thank you." And, it sets the tone up for the show perfectly. But, I mean, in Wicked, you couldn't really imagine, like, Glinda popping up and say, "Hello, this next track..." We need Leah to come back and do an impression of Kristen Chenoweth. But I'm just thinking, what other shows kind of massive twists that they just don't... I mean...
One show I'm surprised doesn't have something like that in, and I'm not going to go into the plot for the sake of spoiling it, but it is one of my favorite shows to listen to, is It Should Have Been You, or Should Have Been You, sorry. That basically, the short story of what that's about is it's set at a wedding and everybody has their own idea as to who the bride should be getting married to. That's all I'm going to say. But it plays out like a farce, and it's great, and it's so much fun, but that has some big twists and turns in the show, and I'm surprised throughout the album that they don't have moments where they're like, by the way, if you've not seen this, maybe don't carry on.
Thinking about it, is Nessa Rose, spoiler alert, getting out of her wheelchair that much of a twist? Surely the other stuff that happens towards the end of the show is a bigger twist, which obviously isn't on the album because it's visual, but
from what I'm guessing, it's because she sings Wicked Witch of the East. Like, we know that Elphaba is the Wicked Witch of the West, but Inessa Rose, nobody, like, at that point when you listen to the cast album, I mean, it depends on how observant you are, but it's not necessarily that obvious that Nessa Rose is the witch that the house landed on. I didn't know that when I first listened to the album before I saw the show, and that also plays into the idea of Bok being the Tin Man and Fiera being the Scarecrow, etc., etc. And I think that's probably what the spoiler was, less than her getting out of the wheelchair. I don't know.
I think that might explain the thing that always worried the producers of Wicked coming here was that we aren't as emotionally invested with the Wizard of Oz compared to the Americans. So they probably were only looking at the album and thinking, oh my god, every American is going to get this reference, and it might put them off the show. But it's interesting. What are you listening to at the moment, Ryan? Not right now, because you've got my beautiful voice in your ears, but what kind of shows are you on? What's on your playlist?
So my playlist at the moment is slightly different to what it normally would be because I've started running. So I've been listening to a lot of cast albums that help me through a run, which is not necessarily your typical musical theatre. So as much as I love Wicked, I'm not running to Wicked. I'm not running to falsettos. Then again, Legally Blonde would probably be a great album. I might try that when I run later on. But some ones that I've been cycling through a lot is things like Lizzie, Hedwig and the Angry Inch, The Cher Show, Head Over Heels, Cruel Intentions, Six is a great one, Rock of Ages, those sort of very shows that are very upbeat throughout the thing, throughout the duration of the score, I guess. And they're also some of my go-to shows anyway, things like Lizzie and Hedwig.
I know you're a big fan of Lizzie, so tell us about Lizzie, the Borden musical.
Lizzie, so I feel like a lot of you will know, I say a lot of you would be familiar with I want to say nursery rhyme, but it's not really, of Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, gave her father 41. And it's basically...
All I know is sorry to interrupt, there's a film with Christina Ricci, which I will watch anything that she does. So
there is. There we go. I wanted to get up who wrote it. So the show's written by Stephen... Oh my gosh, I'm going to butcher these names now. Stephen Cheslick DeMeyer, Tim Manor, and Alan Stevens Hewitt, and it's a rock musical, and it's about Lizzie Borden, and it takes you through a little bit before what happened. It goes into like the trial and what happened there, and again, I don't want to give too much away because it is like certain parts of the show are like what the hell, but I love a rock show, I love a rock musical, and it's a powerhouse led by 4 fantastic women vocalists. Like, it's my dream. Is
it still set in the original time where it happened? So why does the rock work for that, do you think? It kind of like Spring Awakening when they kind of would get microphones out and just kind of break away from the...
Kind of. From the little bits that I've seen, and I know they recently just live streamed it as like one of the recorded productions that happened in LA. They live streamed it, but in terms of time differences, by the time the show would have started over here, it would have been like 5 a.m. or 4 a.m. or something, and I just couldn't. Like, I would have died staying up to watch it, and I'm gutted. But the clips that I've seen for the production do utilize handheld microphones over. It's not like it feels more like a rock concert in a way, I guess. And from the stuff that I've read into, again, I don't want to spoil too much in regards to it, but it's all in there. There's a trailer online. Not only do they have period fitting costumes, but they also have slightly more rocked up contemporary costumes, and it just works, and I can't explain why it does. And if somebody told me that this is what this would be about, I'd be like, well, I'm a bit of a horror goon anyway, so I love anything about spooky stuff. And as soon as you tell me that there's going to be a musical about Lizzie Borden led by 4 amazing women, whoever they happen to be cast as, high belting throughout, and a fabulous rock score, I'm 100% there.
Years ago, we did a podcast about horror musicals, and this is something that we can probably talk about ad nauseum. But you can't really, because there aren't really that many, because it kind of it's like murder mystery musicals. The only way it can be done is camp or comedy, or usually both. The only kind of serious horror musical I can think of that people take seriously is Sweeney Todd.
Yeah.
But all the others, Rocky Horror Show, Rocky Little Shop of Horrors, possibly the Lizzie Borden, I don't know if that has elements of kind of camp in it. What do you think?
When the first time I ever listened to the soundtrack, and I can't remember how I stumbled across it.
To the what?
Cast album, I say soundtrack, Anyway, the first time I listened to it, I was like, oh, okay. The second the show starts, there's your tone, the whole show. And as soon as you finish this, I would be like, I'd be urging you to listen to it, because again, I've not seen the staging too much. I've seen the clips that's out there, but just from the tone of it, it does take itself very seriously, but from the way it's done, it works. It just works, because it's so I could go.
But apart from Sweeney Todd, name a horror musical that is actually scary. And that's what's difficult about it, because that's what Sweeney Todd does so brilliantly. It has a jump scare within the first about 15 seconds, which is iconic. And, friends of mine who saw the show in the 70s at the Drury Lane just said it was the most deafening thing. People jumped out of their seats at that point. You know the bit I'm talking about. But there aren't really that... I mean, does what's it called? Lizzie? Or it's
Lizzie.
Does it go into horror sound?
So, yeah. So listening to it, again, I can only base on what I've listened to. It is so atmospheric. And I keep going back to the first time I listened to it, because I watched so much horror. I've watched trash. I've watched things you probably wouldn't be able to get your hands on, because the BBFC are like, no, thank you in this country. I've seen a lot of stuff, and it made me uneasy when I listened to it. And what's so brilliant about it, in my opinion, is it keeps that tension. It takes you on a roller coaster ride of emotions, but the last, the points of the show which require that tension have it. And every single time, without fail, when I listen to the show, I'm gripped, waiting. Like, I don't know what the ending's going to be, even though I've heard it so many times. It's frustrating from a performer's point of view, because it's like, I would love to perform this show, but it's not in my castability or like my access that way. But it's one of my favorite shows to come out of like the past. I don't even know when it was first written. 2014, maybe early in that, 2011.
Why do you think it's never? Would you say it's a cult show? It certainly sounds like a cult show. Yeah,
I think I think it's the rock score, because it is a lot. It's not, when I say rock, it's not like musical theatre rock, if that makes sense. It is very heavily influenced by rock music, in the sense that it's going to be a loud show. It's very much in the same vein as Hedwig and the Angry Inch. Like, if you listen to that cast album, it's very rocky. And that doesn't appeal to everybody. And I think because it's such a dark story, it's, again, Sweeney Todd is very dark, but it has that whimsical, like, oh, they're putting people into pies, and like Mrs. Lovett, and like there is Ellen Pirelli, there is elements that ease people like into the story. With Lizzie, I think it's a very intense ride from start to finish, whereas there are those breaks in Sweeney Todd that sort of make it a little bit more accessible to the average theatre goer, should I say.
Did you ever hear or listen to Evil Dead the musical?
Yes, so it's funny you mentioned that. Evil Dead the musical, not that I support or condone or talk about bootlegs ever. I would never do that, but I may or may not have inhaled a bootleg of Evil Dead the musical because I was very curious about it. It sounds like it was fun. I thought it was just a good time. That's all I can say.
But not scary?
No, but Evil Dead is a weird one, because Evil Dead Evil Dead is, when I'm talking specifically about the movie, and this is going into more movie horror territory, the movie for me, I wouldn't necessarily say is scary, but it's shocking and it's graphic. But I wouldn't say it was scary per se. And the tone the musical takes on definitely feels like the tone that Evil Dead 2 started to bring into the franchise. And then you look at things like Ash versus the Evil Dead now, like the television series, there is a bit more of a tongue-in-cheek approach, which certainly the first film kind of lacks in a way. But I think that's the tone they used to bring into the musical. So for me, it made sense.
I mean, a couple of years ago, I can't remember if it was Evil Dead or Night of the Living Dead, a play, and it was in Camden, I think, and it's produced by Katie Lipson, and it was brilliant. It was entirely in black and white, and you had you could sit on the stage if you had stage seats, and they would give you like bibs to wear to stop the blood going all over you. And of course everyone got covered in blood. It's like kind of, SeaWorld, sit in the splash zone or something. And it was really cool because it had sort of about 25 different endings. They would just play out the same ending, or they had 25 different endings for the same stories. Like, what if women were in charge of all this? So they had the whole kind of 6-minute scene at the end played like that. And that was really cool. Wasn't a musical. And as we've discussed with ghost stories, I think horror just works better as plays, because the minute you have songs, it kind of does add a kind of element of, oh, we're safe because it's not that serious. But, Phantom of the Opera is quite creepy at certain points.
For sure.
Beauty and the Beast, Hunchback of Notre Dame. There are lots of kind of scary...
Well, one show you've talked to me about a lot is the first time you saw Cats. How scary that was when you first saw it.
Terrifying. Because you're sitting in a pitch black theatre, and if you get the seats that move, it's even more scary. And then suddenly you have the cat's eyes. They were scattered around the whole audience, and they all lit up at once. So suddenly there's kind of, just flashing eyes in your face, and that was it's quite scary, that moment, but very effective. And then you've got to sit through Cats. But the thing I want to leave this conversation with is there's stuff to look forward to, isn't there? And that's good, whether it's shows that we enjoy listening to or shows that we wish would come out. And I think what we're going to see after the pandemic ends is a big surge of comedy. And because that's what happened after the Great Depression in America, and then also what happened in 9/11 in America, things like Hairspray and lots of other stuff kind of...
You're in town.
Yeah. So what old-fashioned comedies, Ryan, would you... Because it's not really a kind of era you're massively interested in, is it? The kind of... What do you think?
The only reason I would say it's probably not an area I'm massively interested in is I would still happily go and see anything like that. I'm just such a fan of high belting that the further back you go, it changes from high belting to gorgeous, beautiful, legit singing, which I do appreciate. But I'm one of these people that everyone's trying to change, where they're like, we need to get rid of high belting. I'm like, no, please, I love it. I know Anything Goes is coming to the West End. Having done the show, it'll be very weird to see the show. But that's a cracking show, and I think that's the perfect tone that we need after this. So that'll be quite exciting. A bit more contemporary, and it'll bring it on.
What I don't want is millions of people to suddenly do Pandemic the Musical or
don't.
COVID the Musical. If you're doing an Edinburgh show and it's called COVID or Pandemic or Trump or Boris or Hancock, don't. Thank you very much. We'll leave it there.
I feel like sorry, I know we're going to leave it there. When you're talking about that, I feel like in the future, in the far future, there will be a place for stuff like that. But right now, just coming out of something that it's just been rumored today that lockdown could be a thing until October. That is sickening.
Locktober.
That's sickening. And I think the last thing everyone can agree on is they don't want to be sitting through a 2-hour piece of the 2-year experience everyone's just lived through. Maybe in the future, but who knows?
Anyway, Ryan Nixon, thank you so much for chatting to us today. We'll have you on. We'll have you on again soon. You can find Ryan at the Real R Nixon. Is that correct on Twitter?
That is correct.
And things.
Yes.
Finally got it right. And Ryan, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For more information about Musical Talk, please visit our website at musicaltalk.co.uk. You can email us at feedback@musicaltalk.co.uk, listen to past episodes on iTunes and YouTube, and follow our social media channels on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.